Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Mallory Sofastaii.
And I'm Patrick Pete. At WMAR, we are working for you. And part of that commitment is celebrating Black history. Now, we're here at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum in Baltimore City, a place where the authentic voice of Maryland African-American history and culture can be heard.
We're bridging the gap, celebrating the history makers of the past and those who are making history today. We begin with photographer and philanthropist Jermaine Gibbs. Gibbs is living Black history. He has turned his passion for photography into a mission that is bridging gaps across continents. He's traveled the globe taking pictures. His work is in the Smithsonian, and now he's using his art for an even bigger purpose.
So Hope Missions is a nonprofit that works through the continent of Africa that specializes in clean water, education, and infrastructure.
Back in 2016, Jermaine Gibbs was hired by a church to take photos of a revival in Kumasi, Ghana. What started out as a work trip ultimately changed the trajectory of his life.
But then I stumbled off and wandered around into some of the villages and seeing how people were living. And then I seen someone go to a lake and get water. And I said, why are they getting that water? And they said, well, this is all the water this village have. And I was like, wow.
When he got back to the States, he came up with the idea to start Hope Missions.
The acronym HOPE is to help open people's eyes. And that name is literally because when I went, my eyes wasn't open actually until I got there. This is going to be our 4th year this year. We have built wells in Kumasi, Ghana. We have built 6 restrooms at a school. We completely did a renovation at one school. We built a kitchen there. We provided 15 laptops. We paid the teachers' salaries for a couple years. So it's really all about helping to make them sustainable and then also to provide them with the materials they need to have a quality education like we have here in the States. So this was the village where we built our well at. These people in this village never had clean drinking water prior to us building this well. This young lady, she probably is about 2 years old. This was the first time in her life ever having clean drinking water.
In just 3 years, Hope Missions has helped to change a community. Next month, Jermaine and his team will head back to Africa for a groundbreaking ceremony.
And we are about to build our own school there, which will be a charter school. It will be 100% free to students, but it will be a dual school. So in the daytime, it'll be a charter school, and then in the evening, we're going to have it as a trade school.
And we just wanted to say thank you to each and every sponsor and everyone who
I always knew that I would be able to help people, but on this level, I've never thought or imagined that. I think I've made a lot of impact and change in the Black community, so I do feel like I am Black history. I hope to be on that list of not just an amazing photographer that captured beautiful images, but also someone who invoked change all around the world.
God bless you, God bless you, God bless you. Yes.
Now, if you're a fan of baseball, you may know something about the Negro Leagues. But did you know that there's a Negro League museum in Owings Mills?
When you walk in the entrance, it's the first sign you see. When you get off the elevator of the first 3 floors, you're transported back in time with the likes of Satchel Paige, Leon Day, and Mamie Peanut Johnson. A time when Baltimore had 2 teams, the Black Sox and the Elite Giants.
My passion for playing baseball has always been a part of me. It's part of my DNA.
Ray Banks is one of the founders of the Hubert V. Simmons Museum of Negro Leagues Baseball, and he says it all began when he learned of a park dedication for pitcher Leon Day.
3, 2, 1.
I got my car and rode over there. And when I got there, I was like a kid in a candy store. I seen so many Negro League players. And in this showcase, it shows Jackie Robinson, Josh Gibson.
From that day to present day, Mr. Banks has been working to keep the legacy of the Negro League players alive.
First year signed up with 1957, right out of college.
The Negro League to me showed, even though it's a sports event, baseball that is, that no matter what color you are, if you look down upon, there's greatness in every one of us. The Negro League ball players, they were pioneers of the civil rights movement in every respect. They could not go in restaurants. They could not sleep in hotels. They could not use the traveling facilities of the Caucasian ball teams that played ball. Those men had to ride through towns, change on the bus, but they survived. They overcame.
Financed by entertainers like Louis Armstrong and Bojangles, and a few gangsters, the Negro League became a sight to see. From stealing bases to showmanship and power hitting, not only did they overcome, they changed the way the game of baseball was played forever. By 1952, 150 players had migrated from the Negro Leagues to the majors.
But then what starts happening, nobody wanted to go see just the average player because all the good players are now in the major league. Right. So if everybody's leaving, it's nothing over here.
In a last-ditch effort to salvage the league and bring in revenue, 3 women were added to the Indianapolis Clowns roster.
Mamie Peter Johnson, Tony Stone, and Connie Morgan. Those 3 women started a new beginning back in the day, and the men didn't want them to play at first. But Mamie said, no matter, you may be men, and we may be women, but we're just as good as you are.
And in 1956, the Negro League officially dissolved, but thanks to people like Mr. Banks, they won't be forgotten.
Many of those players in the Negro Leagues also served their country valiantly during World War II and the Korean conflict. We sat down with the Montford Point Marines, a group of black men who integrated the Marines, fighting racism and injustice, all while fighting for their country.
They wanted us to fail, because they didn't want us in there in the first place. So, they were hoping that we would fail so they could be all white again,
Before World War II, the Marine Corps was an all-white male institution. But on June 25, 1941, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802, which prohibited ethnic or racial discrimination in the nation's defense industry.
We all knew we were going to Paris Island. Paris Island was strictly for white Marines, no blacks for all. So we had Muffle Point Camp, which was set up for blacks.
The whole thing was set up to fail. That it seems to me that there had been some planning up top somewhere to just give this thing a try, to say we put an effort into it, but we know it's not going to work.
But these men proved everyone wrong.
We paved the way for those that came behind us, because had we failed, there wouldn't be any legacy.
In other words, we had to fight for the right to fight.
I sit here kind of embarrassed that I didn't know the history in regards to the Montford Point Marines. I joined the Marine Corps voluntarily in 1969. At the point, I still didn't know about the Montford Point Marines.
He wasn't alone in not knowing this history. In fact, these men weren't publicly recognized until President Obama awarded them with Congressional Gold Medals in 2011.
I thought I went through hell in '69. I can't even fathom what it must have been like to go through a military branch of the military that didn't want you, that tried everything within their power to make you fail.
And no one kept telling us to keep pushing. You had to tell yourself. You just did as much as you could. And you did it as best as you could.
Oh, when we came back from our combat tours, we came back to a country that said, hey, welcome back, and he was treated fairly. We look at Muffle Point Marines. During World War II, they put their lives on the line, for serving in combat. But when they got back to the country, they would still have to face segregation and still being treated as second-class citizens, although they served their country honorably.
You go to war and you come back, then they tell you to get back in your place.
Even though the military has come a long way as far as segregation goes, the men who followed in the steps of the Montford Pointers are proud to keep their legacy alive.
We sit and listen to everything they say, and I just pass it on, because that's my history right there. These guys got stories to tell, and people need to open their eyes and ears and listen to it, because they might learn something.
The Montford Point Marines, always faithful.
Tenacious.
Grateful.
Admiration.
Historical.
Heroes.
When we come back, we'll see how the Phantom of the Opera is bridging gaps.
And we'll meet the first black woman to serve as Baltimore County's administrative officer. Stacey Rogers is a Sunday school teacher, a grandmother, a mentor, and the first black woman to serve as Baltimore County's administrative officer. All of her life, she's been about service and bridging societal gaps.
I am a coal miner's daughter from Western Pennsylvania, trying to make life better.
The appointment is confirmed.
That's how the first black woman appointed to the role of Baltimore County Administrative Officer would describe herself. Already having put in 28 years in government, service is what drives her.
I believe that we are called, we have a mission, and I don't feel I've quite completed my mission. I have had wonderful, as I call them, tours of duty. This is my 7th tour of duty. Had the pleasure of working at every level of government, but to come home to my home county to round out my career is just incredible.
Over those 28 years, she enjoyed each role, but there is one that stands out from the rest.
6 of the 8 Obama years. Such an incredible tour is because at the federal level, you get to influence national policy. Public policy that will touch people for generations, millions of people for generations.
When she finished undergrad and began working at Coppin State University, she had no idea where her journey would take her, but she had always been told that she had the capacity for greatness.
And I'm still pinching myself. That's where my faith has taken me, that I have been prepared, educationally, experientially, but from a faith perspective, knowing that I'm grounded in service. And so the titles don't matter, salaries don't matter. And when people ask me what I'm here to do and what my legacy will be, and it will be a legacy that Baltimore County will be recognized as a well-run, best practice jurisdiction.
She doesn't want to be the first and last black woman to fill this role and others like it. Through her commitment to mentorship, she hopes to bridge the gap between talent and opportunities given.
Who I call my professional mother is Carolyn W. Colvin. Ms. Colvin and I were paired through my professional association, the National Forum for Black Public Administrators. So for 25 years, we were together as a mentoring team. So for 25 years, I had the pleasure of learning from her. But that's what we're called to do. We are called to ensure the next generation that this role just isn't about me for where we are now and this time. I'm really here to set the example for leaders to come, leaders of color, women, so that they too can aspire and see themselves in roles that have not traditionally been roles that women hold. So between work, my grandkids, the sorority, and church, pretty much takes up all the time.
From one first to another, Derrick Davis is a Broadway actor, having played Curtis Taylor in Dreamgirls, Mufasa in The Lion King. But it's his latest role as the Phantom of the Opera that has him bridging a color gap in casting.
My mother taught me growing up, don't let your color define you. let it be a part of your foundation, but don't let it define you. Because when you start to let your color define you, there are limitations that can arise, whether you put them on yourselves or whether other people put them on you. So I never bought into the idea that I couldn't do anything or wasn't right for anything because of my color. I just made sure that my level of excellence preceded my color, and that it kind of made people blind to my color. And so I could get into any door that I wanted to.
That philosophy has opened doors for Derrick Davis to play one of the most sought-after roles on Broadway, the Phantom of the Opera. He is the first African-American to tour in the iconic role.
It feels like a weight of responsibility. It's a pleasant weight, but a weight nonetheless. You know, immediately it felt like a fragile treasure was in my hands, you know, and I had to take very special care of it.
That man and mystery.
Aside from remembering his lines and hitting his notes, a big part of the weight is knowing that young people are watching him.
I don't take that lightly. I was a youth leader and a youth pastor in my church for several years before I stepped into my career, and I had a group of about 300 young people in Long Island that I was in charge of. And so young people are very close to my heart, and I understand how consciously and subconsciously they pattern themselves after what they see. So I take very special care to make sure that what I exemplify is excellence and greatness, and I try to live that way in my everyday life.
He calls himself a dreamer and dream climber, and has a few words of wisdom for anyone with a dream.
You know, to them I would say dream as big as you can, and then let your journey blow your biggest dreams out of the water. You know, I could never have dreamt. This was the first show my parents took me to see as a child, and I had no dream of playing the role at that time, though my mother, being the Rebecca that she is, she would just encourage me and say, you're going to be the Phantom, you're going to do this, you're going to play Mufasa, you're going to play... And little by little I began to believe it, and I stepped into it. So don't limit yourself. Don't limit yourself. Literally nothing is impossible.
When we return, we'll take a look at the first Black-owned movie theater in our area.
Next Act Cinema is the first Black-owned movie theater in the Baltimore area. But owners Robert Wright and Anthony Fikes didn't set out with that goal in mind. They just wanted to open a business that could be enjoyed by their families, friends, and the community.
For the most part, it's been great. The community has been extremely supportive of the theater. We're working constantly to make sure that we give a good product, but it's been going beyond our expectations.
Rehabbing the entire building and creating a nostalgic yet chic feel, Next Act Cinema is carving a lane of its own, serving up Maryland cuisines like crab cakes and the Baltimore Club alongside other locally crafted treats.
We wanted something that was a lot more boutique. We didn't want to be a Regal. We don't want to be a AMC. We wanted to be small because we wanted guests to feel like we were being very attentive to them. This theater is one of two theaters in the building. Originally, there were about 80 seats, stadium-style seats in this theater. And so what we did was, in order to create that boutique-type setting, we reduced that number down to about 40. Another thing that was really important to us was to make sure that we had these revolving tables, as well as we wanted to have leather seats as well.
When it came to being the first Black-owned theater in the area, it didn't hit home for Rob and Anthony until a viral Instagram post.
Yes, us seeing us. Us seeing us inside us.
To take the dirt out of the bag.
That's a classic right there.
It wasn't until we launched a movie, particularly early on, Us, that we really saw the impact and what this meant. And then once we started getting a lot more publicity about this being the first Black-owned theater in Maryland, as well as maybe one of two or three in the country, that meant a lot. And so we believe now that it's extremely empowering. It's really important for us to make sure that we get out our message, our story, our brilliant actresses and actors out to people so that they can see it also. But we also are working with a lot of local business owners too.
This business venture that started amongst two friends who met in corporate America is now bridging gaps and creating new opportunities for other small business owners and artists.
We're doing a lot of events now. So, for example, we do live jazz. We do happy hours. We did karaoke. We do comedy. We do birthday parties. So that in of itself also is very rewarding. The live jazz that we had a couple of weeks ago, one of our employees here, Ray Reddit, he's actually keyboardist in that band. I always tell people that we're standing on the shoulders of people before us, but we also are holding hands with the people that are here now.
Thank you for joining us at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum.
Yeah, I hope that you were inspired by the unsung heroes who were not only using their lives, but also their experiences to bridge the gap. Next, we'll send it over to Kelly Swoop for a look at how Black Greek life is also bridging the gap.
But before we go, we want to remind you to ask yourself, how will I bridge the gap?